Welcome to the Weekly Dose Podcast, your one-stop shop for the weekly news in incretin mimetic therapies, with your host, man on the Manjaro, Dave Knapp.
Welcome to the September 3rd, 2024 edition of On the Pen, the Weekly Dose Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, man on the Manjaro. That's why I'm here. You, my friend, are on the pen. WEGOVY, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Manjaro, Zepbound, Compound, that pen. That's what we talk about here at On the Pen, the Weekly Dose. We go over all the news in obesity medicine. And so I hope that if you are just joining us for the first time, you find this information valuable. If you've been around with us for a while, consider hitting that 5-star rating over on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you watch your podcast, and give it a nice little review, because that is really what helps to push this podcast out to the rest of the world. And if you enjoy getting updates on the news in all of the medications that are changing the game for so many people who live with metabolic disease, that is a very, very important task. One of the easiest ways that you can advocate is to just give it a 5-star rating and review, share it somewhere where other people will be able to get the benefit of the news, right? YouTube channel hit 12,000 followers this week. So thank you. If you're following over on YouTube, it is growing very fast over there. And so thank you for being a part of that journey as we've grown over there. We've only been on YouTube for just shy of 2 years now. It'll be 2 years here in November. So to hit 12,000 is a really big milestone. Onward and upward to 15,000 if you're watching this and wouldn't mind hitting the show notes or listening to this on Apple Podcasts. Hit the show notes, go over, give the YouTube channel a follow. It has been 77 days without a Novo Nordisk fire. I thought we'd lead the show today with that news. Just kind of surprising at this point with how much during the summertime we were getting news about random fires at Novo Nordisk. We had one on May 16th. We had another one on May 22nd. We had another one on June 18th. Random fires at random different Novo Nordisk locations. Dave Ricks, where were you on these days? I want answers. But yeah, no Novo Nordisk fires for the last 77 days. And this is going to be a very Novo Nordisk heavy on the Pen, the Weekly Dose, because we got a lot of news about Semaglutide this past week, and we're going to jump right into it. WEGOVY reduces COVID-19 deaths. Now, this was a study published last week in the Journal of American College of Cardiology, which found that WEGOVY, the 2.4 milligram dose of semaglutide, reduced the risk of COVID death by 33% among those taking the drug in a clinical trial. Now, the context here is that there was a clinical trial for WEGOVY going on when the COVID-19 pandemic began. And so this allowed research to sort of go back and analyze its impact on patients at high risk of COVID-19 complications due to the underlying conditions like heart disease. So the SELECT trial was measuring outcomes for those with heart disease. And get this, because this is the fascinating takeaway from this study. The study included 17,694 participants, of whom 4,258 of them contracted COVID-19. Among the infected, those taking WEGOVY were shown to be less likely to die from the virus compared to those on placebo. So these findings are a bit fascinating, because obviously when you talk about WEGOVY 2.4 milligrams, you're talking about a massive reduction in weight. Even though these were not necessarily diabetic patients, you have a reduction in, or a better controlled blood sugar, perhaps a reduction in insulin resistance in some of those patients. Of course, the anti-inflammatory properties of GLP-1s are being studied. So people who are reducing their weight, reducing inflammation, perhaps just living healthier overall. You'd see other studies showing a reduction in alcohol consumption and a reduction in high intakes of sugar, as we've seen studies that also show that semaglutide can actually change the taste buds for people who have been, let's say, more addicted to sweet treats and things like that. So healthier lifestyle overall could be part of why we're seeing this, but this also seems to suggest that semaglutide can offer some serious additional benefits beyond the weight loss and diabetes management, which of course all these other studies just continue to show, potentially improving outcomes during pandemics caused by respiratory viruses. So that's a very interesting takeaway. Some editorial commentary from a emergency room physician named Dr. Jeremy Faust. And again, I'll link the article here so you can check it out for yourself. He emphasized the significance of the study, noting that it reveals how semaglutide could have a profound impact on the COVID-19 pandemic, also highlighting the need for a healthier population in general. It is starting to be irrefutable, the evidence that is stacked up against the use of semaglutide, GLP-1 receptor agonists, incretin mimetics in general, because of all the whole host of comorbidities of obesity that it seems to treat. But this big idea of inflammation reduction, if you're somebody who has noticed, be it in your labs or just in general, maybe you deal with a inflammatory condition. If you've noticed a reduction in inflammation, let me know in the comments of the YouTube video. I would love to hear from you. My wife lives with rheumatoid arthritis. She's had it since 10 years old, which was her diagnosis. And we are even looking into that for her because the reduction of inflammation in these medications seems to be proving itself more and more significant. This study also follows another finding that tirzepatide, which is the active ingredient in Zepbound and Mounjaro from Eli Lilly, can reduce the severity of sleep apnea. Right, when you think about a respiratory disease or respiratory infection, and coupling that with sleep apnea, of course, there are likely some benefits to be gained there. When you think about a 51% reduction in obstructive sleep apnea of reversal, right, which is a first in medicine, in modern medicine, for there to be a drug that can actually reverse the condition of chronic obstructive sleep apnea in patients. And we did get that information, top line data, just a couple of months back for tirzepatide. So we'll have to see where this moves forward, but obviously some really positive news for semaglutide. Moving along in the semaglutide news, because there's just so much, seems to be so many studies that are just dropping on like a monthly basis that just show how amazing these medications can truly be. This from the Lancet, WEGOVY reduces heart disease risk by 20%. So this new study, which is just data taken from the SELECT trial, looked at whether semaglutide could help people who have both heart disease and heart failure, a condition where the heart doesn't work as well as it should. The study included over 17,000 people. Again, this is sort of building off the previous study that we gleaned the COVID information from. But the information that we had so far was dealing with heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, which is just a fancy way to say it's a condition of heart failure where your your heart muscles cannot relax properly. And so this also looked at heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, where the heart can't pump the blood effectively. And so the results found that the use of semaglutide helped reduce the chances of serious heart-related issues in both types of heart failure. It lowered the risk of heart attack, stroke, and death from heart disease by 28 to 35%. And it also reduced the likelihood of needing hospital visits due to worsening heart failure by about 20 to 25%. Now, a lot of times we'll hear these numbers and it sort of becomes white noise because, you get all these numbers thrown at you, but I want those numbers to sink in a little bit. If you know or love someone or are someone who deals with heart failure, this lowered heart attack, strokes, and death by 28 to 35%. That is an astounding number. And it reduced the likelihood of needing hospital visits by about 20 to 25%. So those are outstanding numbers. And the thing that I always like to remind people about semaglutide, Ozempic, and WEGOVY is it's still an early phase version of what these medicines will ultimately and can ultimately become. As a GLP-1 receptor agonist explicitly, it only acts on one incretin hormone. That's the GLP-1, where the newer generation, Mounjaro and Zepbound, act on GIP and a little bit of GLP-1 receptor activation also, but primarily GIP. So when you talk about incretin hormones, there are a number of them that are being studied to sort of activate and see the benefits, but all acting very similarly. It seems like GIP, there's a greater reduction in sort of the side effects, the negative parts of these medications. So we'll look forward with great anticipation to the next generation of these drugs. And I can only imagine that these types of study, this type of amazing information will only continue to get more and more compelling, which is really good for insurance adoption. It is really good for the future of these medications when you consider in just a few short years there will be many competitors on the market, and hopefully driving down the cost and increasing accessibility. We talk about pill formulations as well being critical to that as well. On the topic of all the wonderful benefits of these medications that we talk about so often on this channel, sorry about that, whether it's semaglutide, whether it's tirzepatide, whether it's the future medications that we're learning about, like CagriSema or retatrutide. It is absolutely just amazing the health benefits for many people. And if you're just hearing about these medications for the first time and perhaps have an interest in discussing this with a provider as far as how you may be able to obtain a prescription for one of these medications, I strongly recommend that you check out our partners over at Ro. Ro is the company that we partner with at On the Pen. I myself am a community advisor for Ro, so just speaking to Ro and their leadership team on behalf of the community of people who use these medications. ro.co/OTP for On the Pen. That's ro.co/OTP. The links will be in the show notes of this video. Check them out. They have a program called Ro Body, which will connect you with a provider, and if and where appropriate, prescriptions for GLP-1 medications. They'll handle all the insurance side of it. And if you don't have coverage, they have great options for compounded versions of these medications because these medications are in shortage. There are options for compounded versions of these medications, which basically just come from a pharmacy that can put these medications together for you and are much more affordable than the brand name medications if you have no coverage for them or cannot find them, which seems to be a growing issue with these medications. On that topic, I want to get into a little bit of the news this week that we got from Novo Nordisk. So many questions have sort of popped up around the question of tirzepatide and the continued availability of compound tirzepatide, which again, these medications can be compounded, basically made in a little vial by a 503A or 503B pharmacy. You draw the medication up with a syringe and inject yourself rather than the auto injectors available through the branded medication. So tirzepatide has been the topic of conversation because Eli Lilly removed all of the doses of both Mounjaro and Zepbound from the shortage list just a few short weeks ago. This sort of in step with their announcement of releasing single-dose vials. But the question has sort of become, will we still be able to get semaglutide? What about semaglutide? Is that going to be remaining in shortage? Well, we have learned that Novo Nordisk will be leveraging the 2.5 starter dose or 0.25 starter dose of WEGOVY to help control the upper doses of WEGOVY. But we learned this week also that there will be continued shortages in Ozempic, which is semaglutide, the type 2 diabetes version of the drug. Through 2024, largely driven by high demand. Of course, more and more people looking at semaglutide as an option to control their diabetes or chronic weight issues. But the high demand and production limitations are an issue. You saw earlier this year, Novo Nordisk has been aggressively expanding their manufacturing capacity, trying to keep up with demand feverishly, but to no avail because the demand is simply too high. And I think you're going to continue to see that for both Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, just a staggering demand. 190 million people in the United States dealing with obesity, many more people on top of that number living with type 2 diabetes. And so the demand for these drugs is just astronomical. You did see earlier this year that Novo Nordisk announced their intentions to acquire the company Catalent in I believe it was a $16 billion deal. Catalent, of course, is more of a finish and fill. So they get the drug right from the drug companies, the manufacturers, and then they put them in these injector pens. And Catalent not only fills injector pens for Novo Nordisk and in the semaglutide drug, they also finish and fill pens for Eli Lilly. So, of course, and many other companies as well are contracting with Catalent. So there's been a little bit of pushback within the industry as to whether or not the FTC should allow that deal to go through. Everything that we've heard up until this point, got a flashing sign behind us, I guess. Follow on the pen, hit that like, hit that bell, hit that sub. The sign is telling us to hit that like, hit that bell, hit that sub. But you see basically the other interested parties sort of throwing a flag on the field with this Catalent deal. So we'll see if they get this done. We'll see if they're able to get this deal done. My senses say that this is going to be probably harder to get through than Novo Nordisk is letting on. That's what we got for this week. So thank you for joining us for another awesome edition of On the Pen, the Weekly Dose. If you only listen to this on podcast and would like to catch the video version, you can catch it over on the YouTube channel as we push to 15,000 subscribers. We hit 12,000 just today. And so thank you for those of you who are following along over on YouTube. Would love to grow that number to 50,000 within the next 6 to 8 months here, and we can only do it with your help. Jump over, give it a follow, and we of course do a Thursday night show. It's a big announcement here. We do a Thursday night live show on the Pen over on YouTube. It actually streams also to Twitter. It also streams to Facebook, although the connections there are getting harder and harder to get through. But definitely you can always catch it on YouTube. This week we have Dr. Spencer Nadolsky. Dr. Spencer Nadolsky, who founded the company Sequence, which was purchased and acquired by Weight Watchers in a big deal back in 2023, I believe. Maybe 2022 was when this deal was done, but around the first couple of months that we were doing On the Pen, because we reported it here. Dr. Nadolsky has announced that he will be departing the Weight Watchers team. And so he'll be here to share an exclusive interview with On the Pen and chat a little bit about that. Hopefully we can get some idea of what his plans are moving forward and just have a great conversation. He's one of the greatest advocates for obesity medicine out there. Just I love his outlook on patients with obesity, how he sort of approaches his treatment. And so you'll all enjoy that. You have to catch it over on the YouTube channel, though. We will be uploading the audio version of that later next week as well. So looking forward to having Dr. Nadolsky on. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being the best part of what we do at On the Pen. Until next week, have a great week. We'll see you on the next one.